Welcome everybody to this wonderful Sunday morning here at Salt and Light Christian Church. Today I am telling you all a story about a man named C.S. Lewis, the author, for those of you who don't know. He was born in 1898, and he was born to Protestant parents in Belfast, Ireland, Northern Ireland. And in his household, his family loved reading. They just loved books, all kinds of books. Fiction, historical, just any kind of book. They were very keen on reading. And so Lewis inherited this. And as a child, he loved just going throughout his house and finding books that he hadn't read and reading them. And every room had books in it. The dining room had books, the bedrooms all had books, the study was filled to the ceiling, and even their storage attic had tons of books. And none of them were off limits to him. And so, as a young man, he was very well read. On rainy days in Northern Ireland, there are several of those throughout the year. On rainy days, he loved to just go and search through the house to find a book that he hadn't seen before, hadn't read, and begin reading them. And so he was almost entranced with these worlds of fiction and knights in shining armor and anthropomorphic animals who spoke and dressed and stuff, and all these fictional books that were awesome for him as a kid really broadened his vocabulary and his understanding of the English language. Unfortunately, when he was a young man, just before his 10th birthday, his mother passed away from cancer. And this really took a toll on his family. His older brother, his only sibling, was away at boarding school at the time, and his father his mother's death threw his father into a deep depression that he never really fully recovered from. And so their household was never the same after his mother's death. When he grew old enough, he went to Oxford College as a student. And he kind of never really left. His whole life, he stayed at Oxford. Even in his older age, when he went to teach at Cambridge, he would still commute back to Oxford on the weekends to go see his friends and just hang out in a familiar environment. And so, perhaps because of his upbringing with the books and a vast array of opinions and knowledge being given to him at such a young age, or perhaps because of the death of his mother when he was a young boy, he kind of grew a bit resentful towards God. And he had known God. His parents were Protestant. His mother had given him a Bible when he was a young man, or a young boy. However, when he became a man, he had kind of moved away from God. He didn't really want much to do with God, thinking of God as cruel, or at the very least, uninterested. And so he became an atheist while he was a student at Oxford. However, during this time, he continued his love for reading, and he read pretty much any book he could get his hands on. And he began writing poetry. From a young age, he liked to illustrate his own stories. Obviously, they got better as he grew. But when he was in college, he published his first book under a pseudonym, under the pseudonym of Cliff, and he ended up publishing this book of poetry, and it did okay, but not amazing for his first book. But he continued his love for reading. And while he was at Oxford in college, he began reading books by some Christian authors, as well as many of his friends that he had made were Christians. And around this time, God began calling his heart back to him. Through some of the books that he was reading, his views on atheism and his own beliefs were being brought into question. He was very into materialism at this time. Being an atheist, and there being nothing else, why wouldn't he? And so, however, one of his really close friends had converted from atheism to Christianity. And this friend of his would often give him a hard time about his atheism, and especially his materialism. And so, during this time, while reading these books from these Christian authors, as well as having the influence of his Christian friends upon him, he began to take a look at his own beliefs and to look deeper into the Bible as God began calling him, to God. And so he ends up becoming a Christian, and from there he continues writing, and we'll see next week how God really blesses his writing and uses his talents. So thank you.